Nick Freitas filling in for John Fredericks on the John Fredericks Show, WJFN. We are back, and we have a special guest, as this entire show has been about talking about the contrast, talking about the contrast of vision, about what the government should be doing, what the government should not be doing, and how Virginia will fundamentally change. Again, those are not my words. That's the Democrats' words. Fundamentally change if they take over, which, from what I see, that means more infringements on your Second Amendment rights, more taxes, more regulations, ending right to work, basically a whole lot of stuff that would transform Virginia into something I don't think most of us would recognize. On with me right now, we have Kelly McGinn, who is running for the House of Delegates. Kelly, are you on with us?
I am.
All right. Well, Kelly, thank you again for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, the 13th District, and why you are running.
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. This has been quite an adventure since I threw my hat in the ring in March. Well, first of all, I am running because I am a passionate Virginian. I love this state. I'm raising 4 kids here with my husband, and I feel all of us are called to step up at some moment in our lives, hopefully every day, to contribute to our community. And so I was very disturbed, as you kind of mentioned in your opening, about some of the things that are we're talking about in our state this legislative session, taking us in a far left direction that I don't think is consistent with what the people in my district are looking for. And speaking of my district, just to tell you about it a little bit, if I'm fortunate to be the delegate, I would be representing Manassas Park, and then a part of Prince William County, which would include parts of Manassas, Gainesville, and Haymarket. So it's a wonderful community. It's where my husband and I chose to build our first home 20 years ago. And I've driven these roads, I've used these schools, and I really want to be an advocate for the quality of life issues on the ground here, because people they need a strong fighter in Richmond, and we haven't had that for the last couple of years. Well,
and I'll tell you what, it's when Danica first ran, the whole thing was transportation, right? It was,
mm-hmm.
I mean, that was what it was. It was transportation. That's what Danica was running on. But then when Danica's down in Richmond, all of a sudden there's a whole host of other legislative priorities that, let's just say, have nothing to do with practical solutions about transportation. It has more to do with kind of this extreme left-wing policy that we're seeing coming over and taking over the Democratic Party in Virginia. I mean, it really is different. I mean, there's still a lot of Democrats down there that we may disagree on some policy, but there's still some fundamental disagreement about property rights and free markets, and then you've got other people running that they want to seize the means of production. I mean, it looks like something out of a bad coffee shop, with a Marxist name on it. But so there really is kind of a bait and switch, I think, going on with a lot of Democrats in these areas. And I want to ask about something, because I actually heard that Danica was essentially going around telling people that, well, you're just a mom. And first of all, I find that offensive because, my mom's incredible, and I know how hard she worked just being a mom, and then all the other stuff that she had to do as well. So this idea that you would denigrate someone for raising and educating children the way you are, and somehow put that out as it doesn't qualify you to run for office. That I find, first of all, very offensive. And then also the idea that it's a misrepresentation. I mean, I've been reading up on you and your work as a human rights lawyer. I mean, you would think at a time, at a time when we're dealing with some major issues, and some of it stemming from our completely broken immigration policy, where we've had an uptick in human trafficking and other things like that. Your experience working on human rights law, I think that would be a huge benefit to the General Assembly. And so to have that denigrated or flippantly discussed like that is a little bit offensive. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Sure. Well, I want to start with my credential as a mom, because it's something I don't run away from. It is a choice. I am a product of the women's movement. I was privileged to get a wonderful education and to get to do some really exciting things in my career. But I chose motherhood. I was told, my husband and I struggled with an infertility diagnosis. We thought we would never have children. And I was in the midst of doing my dream job on Capitol Hill as a human rights lawyer when we got a call that we were chosen to adopt a baby. And we made a decision as a couple that we were going to double down on family. In my youth, I was all about saving the world, and I still think it's a really amazing thing to do human rights law, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I also think if you want to change the world, sometimes the best way to do that is to love your family.
Oh, yeah.
That's a direct quote from Mother Teresa, one of my heroes. She said that in her acceptance speech for the Nobel Peace Prize. So I did that, and I've been home for 16 years raising and educating children and teaching them civics, teaching them about what it means to be an American, and driving these roads and struggling with educational issues, healthcare issues. So I'm knocking doors now, up to about 5,000, and I don't hear people complaining about the idea of a mother serving us in Richmond, particularly a politically astute mother. So again, this is what people on doors have told me, that that's the word on the street, that I'm just a mom. But with that said, being a mom is a credential in and of itself. But I was privileged to live the American dream. My mom's an immigrant from Ireland, naturalized citizen. I was raised a Yankee Doodle dandy, and they put education first. So I was privileged to have a wonderful primary and secondary education. I won a scholarship to be an exchange student in Germany, where I got to travel to the communist East Germany and see up front what the stark contrast between a democracy and a capital system and a very, very sad deprived people in a communist nation who are desperate to get out. That wall wasn't to keep, but to keep them. They were trying to get out. No one was trying to get in. I can show you that. But then studied diplomacy at Georgetown and went on to UVA Law, where I really, really was absolutely fascinated by what can be done as an American in terms of advancing the cause of human rights abroad. Did a lot of immigration work in private practice as a pro bono lawyer, sought political asylum for people who had suffered egregious discrimination politically in many countries. But then the dream job was being an explicit advocate for human rights issues in the Senate. And there, I was confounded with the reality that slavery is very alive and well on our planet. There are children that are born in India, for example, that are, chained to looms and spend their entire lives, in effect, being treated like disposable people that exist for the sole purpose of promoting the economy. I dealt with North Koreans who had escaped from concentration camps. They are punished 3 generations back in that country for political crimes. So all over the world just made me realize, as painful as it was to confront the suffering, that this country is amazing. And candidly, I'm shocked at some of the political discussion now denigrating our country when we are the single greatest proponent of human rights on the planet and the engine for an economy that raises all ships.
Well, and I got to tell you, that's one of the things that I find so frustrating is some of the language that's coming out of the left right now, and Beto O'Rourke, just trashes this country on a regular basis. And it's almost this attitude that the United States is just so fundamentally flawed and evil, and the only thing that can save us is giving a bunch of political power to Beto O'Rourke and people that agree with them. And it's just offensive, not only because it's not true and it's just blatantly false on its face, but the implications behind it. It's this idea that the only way that we're going to save ourselves is giving a bunch of more political authority and a bunch more authority in general over to the government. And here you are, someone that's spent a good portion of your career and your life advocating for people that were growing up in these so-called socialist utopias. And there just doesn't seem to be, and I really think that's the issue too. A lot of the people that are advocating for these sort of policies have never had to come face to face with what they actually did to people, with what these policies actually meant for people. And you did. You did. So you have I think you have an appreciation that some of these other guys that, socialism for them is something they read in a book. It's a concept. It's not, they haven't come face to face with the practical consequences of what happens when you do give the government too much power and you degrade human freedom as a result. Hey, Kelly, tell me some of the issues that you've been when you go and you talk to the doors, other than the fact that you're learning that, Danica's going around disparaging motherhood as a credential for elected office, which is again absurd and offensive. What are some of the things that you're hearing at the door that you want to work on when you get to Richmond?
Yeah, well, I would say that the thing I'm concerned about is rising cynicism about whether politicians, care. Because in my district, we live 30 to 40 miles outside of D.C., and 60% of us commute to work from Prince William County. And, as a practical matter, most of us realized that we were going to spend some time in our cars when we moved out here. Yeah. But it has gotten ridiculous. Transportation policy is the number one thing that people talk to me on the doors because they're frustrated. They want to make it to their kids' ball games or they want to get to work on time. And we're moving beyond just inconvenience to a road rage situation. I mean, my own child was subpoenaed to traffic court because he and his father stopped to help a man out of a wreck on Route 28, which is the road that Danica Rome promised to fix for us that is worse 2 years later than it ever was. So what I would propose is that the job of the delegate is to ensure that transportation funding comes back to our district, and that has not happened. We were given zero in smart scale funding in their recent review. That's probably more than we want to get into the details of how that is worked out. But there was a small amendment to that to fix one problem in Prince William. But I would go to Richmond and fight doggedly to bring back the tax dollars that our constituents are paying and reinvest them in our roads so that quality of life can be really addressed. And the roads can work and function as they're supposed to. Government can't do everything, but it can do something well, and it needs to in order to maintain the confidence of the people. So we need to invest in our roads and stop this ridiculous stuff about the Green New Deal, for example. My opponent is a big fan of that, but one really interesting thing is if we endorse that, that means that the funding that would otherwise go to alleviate traffic congestion would be required to be transferred to transit. Yeah. We would no longer be having this discussion about how to alleviate our traffic woes. So we just need to double down on what people want, and we need to do it in the context of our constitutional, republic, the rule of law, and doing things procedurally the right way, and people doing their jobs as legislators, as county supervisors. It's really a question of just focusing on what we can get done and making sure that people can keep in their pocket as much of what they earn as possible so they can make choices in their own lives and enjoy what we have here, which is an incredible place to live.
Well, and I think you bring up a really important point here because, again, your opponent likes to talk about transportation. But it goes back to what you said, and there's the whole idea of that government's not supposed to do everything, but government is supposed to do some things. Well, the problem is your opponent goes in the district and says it's all about transportation. Then she goes down to Richmond, and then it's all about everything. Well, again, we don't have unlimited resources to spend on everything, not to mention the fact the government's not supposed to be getting involved in everything. Government's supposed to be doing a couple of things really well, not 50,000 things really poorly. And again, when you have a legislator, and that's one of the things I would encourage the people of your district to really look into that, because that's one of those things that's a little bit more subtle, but it will tell you a lot about what a legislator will actually do. Because if they're telling you that, yes, we're going to have free college, and yes, we're going to have the Green New Deal, and yes, we're going to fix the roads, and yes, we're going to do everything else, they're not being honest with you. They're just not being honest with you. It's not going to be done. But if you have a legislator that goes down there and says, you know what? I don't think the government should be involved in these areas. I think that's better left to free people working together in voluntary cooperation. And because we're not going to interfere in those areas, we can actually focus on something the government should be doing, like public safety should be doing, like some of this transportation. So I would just really, anybody listen to this, you need to be listening to what your legislators are telling you, what your candidates are telling you. Because if they're promising you everything, you're going to get nothing. But if they're saying that they're going to respect constitutional boundaries, they're not going to expand government in every area possible, but then they're focusing in on a couple areas that actually are legitimate functions of government, that's someone that's going to be able to show up to the Transportation Committee. That's someone that's going to be able to show up to the Appropriations Committee and actually get the things that they need in order to make positive changes. But you can't do it if you're promising everything to everybody all at the same time. So, no, I think you bring up a great point with that.
Yeah, and the other thing that people really talk about on the doors, I mean, there's any number of other quality of life issues, but partisan rancor is getting really old for people. And, what I say is look, I mean, I'm talking about quality of life issues, and you know what, roads and schools and public safety, they don't have a party affiliation. We all have to live together. We have to talk to each other. And I would hope, particularly as a mom who's told my kids that they need to treat people a certain way at school and in their, in their interactions with friends, I want to treat people the same way, with respect. Unfortunately, it hasn't always been accorded to me. There are a lot of assumptions made about, how I would treat people, because of my party affiliation. And I really think that we need to grow up and be adults in Richmond. If I'm there, I'd be delighted to work with Democratic colleagues to make sure that my people are getting, what they need. Better roads, a focus on schools, making sure that we fund them properly, that our children are safe in school, and that our communities are safe. We have rising opioid abuse in my community. MS-13 is on the rise. We need to keep a laser look at, ensuring that criminals aren't being re-released out into the public. And the other thing is human trafficking. I worked on that as a human rights lawyer, and that was a third world problem 20 years ago, or so I thought. And it's in my community. I mean, I've talked to legal advocates here who are telling me that pretty much every high school in my district has had at least one case of attempted human trafficking, if not successful. That terrifies me as a mother, and I've had to have some hard conversations with my kids about, not being very careful about who they friend on social media, and parents need to keep a close look at these issues that frankly shouldn't be a part of life in the United States of America, but are, and we need to work together to take care of our community.
Well, and again, I look at some of the policies that are being recommended, and it blows my mind. And sometimes people ask, is immigration really an issue at the state level? And it can become, because when you do have a broken immigration system, and it allows criminal organizations like drug cartels, it allows criminal organizations like gangs, like MS-13, to be able to exploit illegal immigrants, you see an uptick in human trafficking as a result. And I mean, you're absolutely right. There's this attitude that if you're a Republican, you don't, somehow you don't care about people. It's like, no, we desperately care about people. We just don't think this is the right solution for it when you're creating an environment where it's so much easier for exploitation to happen.
Exactly.
And you don't solve that problem. I mean, look, I'm a criminal justice reform guy, but you don't solve the problems of violence in your community by being soft on violent crime or on human trafficking. Those are the sort of crimes that we need to go after, and we need to prosecute, and we need to be diligent within our communities so that people feel safe to report it, and they feel like they're strong victims witness programs and things like that, where they come in and they come alongside those people. So no, I think you bring up a great point. Well, listen, Kelly, I really appreciate, again, what you've had to say today, your focus on things. And again, I think one of the most important things you said it's a little bit subtle, right? But it's important is, you can't trust a politician that's promising you they're going to fix everything and they're going to pay for everything and they're just going to do it by taxing more or, I don't know, building the Green New Deal. You need to find people that actually have practical solutions, that actually understand that we do operate within a budget. And you understand that, and you've actually got solutions that, again, you can actually implement those. They're workable. There's something where you can get people to cross the aisle and say, okay, we don't agree on these other issues over here, but we agree that 28's an issue, and we agree we got a problem. So let's focus on that. Let's kind of push aside the other things that we don't agree on right now. Let's focus on what we do agree on and just get this through. And I think that's excellent. How do people learn more about you? How do they donate to your campaign?
Sure. Well, I have a website, kellymcginn.com. I also have a Facebook page, which you can find by just searching for me, Kelly McGinn for delegate. And I just leave you with this. I mean, I've stepped up to serve the public, in the House of Delegates. I would just urge your listeners to think about what they can do to make their community better. Benjamin Franklin, who unfortunately was not a Virginian, said we would have a republic as long as we could keep it. Oh. And I think that our democracy, our republic, is more fragile than people would give it credit for, and that means all of us need to care and to step up and figure out how they can bring their talents and their gifts to serve their community, whether it be in politics or by other means, coaching, serving their schools, and it's my privilege to have this opportunity to serve right now.
Well, I love that you say that, with encouraging people to coach, to mentor, to serve in schools, to serve in their communities, because again, a community is built around the concept that we care about our neighbors and we're going to step in and do it. Not a society where we try to delegate everything to a government bureaucracy and hope that it works out. It's when we are personally invested, and you have clearly been personally invested in your country and your ideals and your community. And so thank you very much, Kelly, for running. That's kellymcginn.com to learn more about Kelly. Go there, volunteer, donate, learn more about what she's doing and how she's going to serve the people of the 13th District. Kelly, thank you very much for being on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nick. Great talking to you.
You as well. You as well.